Welcome back to Face the State on this Sunday morning. Connecticut Republicans had a tough 2018. It was supposed to be their year. With us now, fresh off re-election as party chairman to another term, J.R. Romano. And Chairman Romano, good to see you here in the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And when you look back at 2018, you had an unpopular governor. Yeah. And did the party blow it?
Well, I mean, there's always a lot of factors. I think Bob Stefanowski winning the primary, being underfunded as he was, his spending a lot of money to win the primary, I think hurt. We were outspent by about $30 million. And I'm going to go back to this idea that there were 22 races legislatively that were decided by, I think it was 2 percentage points. 8 recounts. I mean, so this was not this groundswell that the Democrats like to kind of push this narrative. I ran in 2004 when the General Assembly went to 37 members. I mean, that was a really bad year for Republicans. We held our own, and I honestly believe because of how poor Ned Lamont has been running the legislature and how the Democrats have behaved over the last year, we have a huge opportunity in 2020 to regain those seats in predominantly Republican areas.
I was going to ask you that because there are some Republicans who believe that Ned Lamont's the best thing that happened to them. Why is that?
I don't think it's just Ned Lamont. I honestly think you're giving him too much credit. I think we need to focus on the failures within the legislature because Ned Lamont is dealing with a lot of problems that the Democratic Party in the legislature have created. He's just dealing with them poorly, right? So from my perspective, we have to remind local voters and your viewers that your local Democrat, state rep or state senator, is a part of the problem. That it's not just Ned Lamont.
Yeah, in terms of losing some state senators, you lost 2 big names last year, at least 2, Tony Boucher, Scott France, in a Republican town. How did that happen? And what do you do to regain that?
Well, and I'm going to be very frank. A lot of the national politics bled into those particular areas of the state. And frankly, and I get criticized for this, but it's true, is these people can afford to be offended what's happening in Washington, D.C., and fail to recognize the economic crisis that Connecticut was in because they're not as concerned about the fact that taxes are going to rise and how Connecticut's been run so poorly. You know, where Republicans were talking about single moms in Meriden making $60,000 a year as a teacher or a dental hygienist, and now the Democrats are piling on potentially tolls, higher cost of goods with higher minimum wage, higher taxes. I think something like 100 new taxes in that area that families who are struggling economically are going to suffer. And that's kind of where there was a disconnect for many of the voters in those areas of the state.
I want to talk about President Trump a little bit because he was a factor in the most recent election and a lot of the Republicans ran from him because he was not popular in the state. He will be on the ballot in 2020 as you're trying to regain these seats. How do you balance that?
Well, we were successful in 2016. We picked up seats in the Senate, seats in the House with President Trump on the ballot. I think, again, we have to remind a lot of these voters, particularly in wealthier communities, because that's where the Democrats had made gains. They've kind of turned their back on the middle class. They've turned their back on the blue-collar workers, and they're solely reliant now on the one percenters. How far we've come from the Democrats screaming about the one percenters, and now they've turned into their voting base because they're the ones that are most upset with what's happening in Washington, D.C. We have to go back and work and explain to some of our wealthier voters what their vote means to that single mom in Meriden or Norwich or the Valley where I'm originally from, because it truly has had a very grave impact on their lives.
In 2010, Tom Foley lost to Dan Malloy, came back 4 years later, lost again. Bob Stefanowski lost to Ned Lamont this most recent go-around. He sounds like a candidate already, even though he's not quite committed to running in 2022. Would you like to see him be the standard bearer again, or do you want a fresh face?
Well, ultimately, that's going to be up to the party as a whole. One of my jobs, I feel, as the party chairman is to, frankly, allow the party to choose who they want to represent them to take on Ned Lamont. I don't think Bob's decided what he's doing yet, but I know that he's taken this loss personally in terms of the learning process, and he is going to advocate for the voters that supported him throughout that whole process and people who donated to his campaign. But I'm sure, Bob Stefanowski was not mentioned in 2014. There could be other candidates that show up.
He bypassed the party convention. What does that tell you for future conventions?
So there's a big misunderstanding in regards to those conventions. I'm required to have them by law, and I frankly am not a fan of the convention system. I think it creates bad blood. I would prefer to go to a kind of a runoff system that other states have that make it almost more democratic. The Democrats, however, are unwilling to even have those conversations because they prefer backdoor dealing and arm twisting of the insiders, if you will. So until we can get a change, that's the system that we have. But there's different avenues to get on the ballot, and that's just what the Connecticut state statutes are right now.
Who are some of the future Republican leaders that we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, I love George Logan. He's a senator from Ansonia. He has that Route 8 corridor. There's always we have a ton of great candidates out there and great local leaders. Aaron Stewart, Jamie Stevenson. These are people who all run. Themis Claridis. I do think they're going to continue to look at 2022 to potentially get on and run for a statewide ballot. Sue Hatfield, who just got elected as our vice chairwoman, she ran as AG. I'm sure she's not going anywhere. So, there's a lot of really talented Republican elected officials and party activists out there.
This year, the hottest race is the race for the mayor of Hartford. There are 6 candidates. Luke Bronin, who many thought would be a shoo-in for re-election, is now in kind of a tough race. He's got 6 people. Former Mayor Perez is against him, but there's no Republican candidate yet. What do Republicans need to do to make inroads in the cities?
Well, I think the difficulty is that cities oftentimes have this ecosystem of how they work in places like Bridgeport, New Haven, and Hartford. And what Republicans have to do is we have to bring a message of opportunity and prosperity to that community. And that's where we don't really do a good enough job explaining how school choice could benefit communities in Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport. We don't talk about how providing economic opportunity could improve someone's lives beyond that of a government job or whatever it is. We want people to own businesses and start businesses. So we have to really preach that message of opportunity and prosperity. And I think our candidates have to do better doing that.
Good enough. All right, Jay Romano, chairman of the Republican Party. Thanks for being on the program today. Have a good summer. Thanks for watching Face the State on this Sunday. I'll see you next Sunday for another edition of Face the State.